Let me ask you a question. What if you could do more with your retirement funds than just hope for the best? With My Digital Money, you can build a self-directed IRA that goes beyond the usual, combining Bitcoin, gold, and silver for real peace of mind. Imagine Bitcoin's explosive growth, the steady strength of gold, and silver's wildcard potential all working together in one powerful account. While the market zigzags and headlines keep you guessing, these assets help shield your future from inflation and uncertainty. Why let your future hinge on just one bet? With My Digital Money, you're in control. We allow you to invest in crypto, gold, and silver all under one roof, balancing risk and reward and opening the door to bigger opportunities. Don't settle for ordinary. Build a more balanced, resilient portfolio today so you can retire with confidence. Visit My Digital Money and see how easy it is to diversify and protect your retirement today. That is mydigitalmoney.com, or just click the link in the description. Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Seth Keshel. Seth is an all-American Army intelligence veteran and analytics guru. Seth has been researching the election fraud, and now he has come out with his new book, The American War on Election Corruption, The Crusade to Restore Trust in Voting. And I am very happy and honored to have Seth back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Seth, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Well, as always, it's great to be on. It's been a hot minute, but everybody's been so busy, it's hard to keep track of time.
That is true. I mean, I was telling you this before we came on air here that this is like the perfect time for your book to come out with all the investigations going into election fraud right now with Fulton County, Arizona. And, you've been researching and helping and looking into election fraud for quite a while. I mean, why did you decide to put it into book form?
That was a unique opportunity to jump into this. A lot of people have asked me, especially after reading my Substack, Capt.K.US, to write a book. And my answer, maybe even if it's a humble brag, has been that I didn't feel like it was the right time, right chapter in life to write a book because I never considered the mission complete. I always felt like the mission of having fair elections needed to be fully complete to put a book out. But the opportunity came to me because Larry Schweikert, the historian, and for those of you listening to the show today who run homeschools, Larry's got a great book called The Patriot's Guide to the History of the United States that belongs on your shelves, about 6 inches thick. You can't do without it. But Larry's publisher asked Larry if I had a book in me. And this was a couple weeks before Charlie was shot. And people were irritated about the Democrats holding up all of Trump's executive actions having to do with elections. And now with the SAVE Act out, it's a great time. But this was an opportunity to paint the picture of what the fight for election integrity has been like. And it's somewhat on a personal and professional level, but also detailing what exactly has gone wrong with our elections. One thing that some people have noticed about the book is that I asked Newt Gingrich to write the foreword because my goal is to break it out of the grassroots bubbles and get it into the mainstream so it actually changes minds. Because if that doesn't happen, then we're just going to continue talking in circles until the end of time. And it's important to be able to get essential issues like the SAVE Act across, and that's going to take mainstream support.
So let me ask you this. I mean, you wrote the whole book and I see you have it all laid out and has there always been election fraud? I mean, when you started looking at this and you said, okay, look, the 2020 elections, holy crap, look what happened here. And you started to look at a lot of the numbers, they didn't make sense. I mean, did you go back in time? Did you go back like maybe to the beginning and say, hey, you know something? If it happened now, was it happening then? Maybe not on the scale, but has it been happening for quite a while?
Election fraud is the norm. And that's the amazing thing, especially when it comes to conservatives. Most conservatives will tell you they don't trust the government, they don't trust vaccines, they don't trust schools, they don't trust the media. But there are some that will stop short of saying that they believe elections can be rigged. But elections in America, even dating back to the 1800s, have been rigged. You can talk about Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall, or even go into an account that I detail extensively in the book, the 1864 presidential election. So George McClellan, the Democrat, had been one of Abraham Lincoln's key generals who had been fired. Lincoln went through generals uh, one after another.
Hmm.
But you have George McClellan's crew trying to harvest up mail-in ballots from New York's soldiers fighting in the Civil War. And the 1864 election was up in the air in the summer of 64, and it wasn't until there was some battlefield success that Lincoln put the election away. But New York's race came down to less than a single point, which Lincoln ultimately won. But a major mail-in ballot scam was sniffed out by some of Lincoln's allies. So it is the norm throughout not only American history, but world history. And this is proven by 34 out of 47 European countries banning the practice of mail in voting. Then you have other key nations like Mexico, Russia, Japan, Israel that ban the practice. So election fraud has been around a long time. It gets conveniently memory hold if the establishment choices wind up writing it into office.
So why do you think like the conservatives or maybe even the Democrats too, why do you think they don't believe that the elections are rigged? I mean, I think now a lot more people believe it, but before I think 2020 people would say no, elections are safe. They're good to go.
I think there's a lot of people that, even if they're not benefiting from cheating in elections, don't want the can of worms to open up. This is why you see a lot of red states now that are not cooperating with the DOJ asking for voter rolls, because even these red states are dealing with corrupted rolls. The current secretaries of state of a number of decent states are sitting on top of rolls that haven't been maintained for decades. You can look at West Virginia, for example, Oklahoma, all kinds of states are suffering under the same issues. And the more registrations you have with automatic voter registration, the worse things are going to be. That's never been truer than in Georgia, where in 2016 Trump won the state with no real campaign, and then added one of the greatest Republican vote gains of all time in 2020, only to lose the state for the first time in 28 years. The difference was automatic voter registration having 4 years to cycle new registrations, and then a 634% increase in mail in votes from 2016 to 2020. So Republicans that don't want to rip this Band-Aid off probably don't want to deal with the absolute pandemonium that would happen once it comes off.
What was the one of the biggest things that you saw with election fraud? Because, people when you hear about it, you hear like, oh, it's the mail-ins, oh, it's the machines, oh, it's the fake illegals that they're using. I mean, is it just one thing or is it many things together? What did you find?
Well, I consider there to be eight cardinal sins of election administration, and
Wow.
three of them are the worst. You have automatic voter registration, universal or excessive vote by mail, and then ballot harvesting. So with automatic registration, this has led me to believe that the foundation of American election fraud is voter registration corruption. When you look at automatic registration, 24 states today run automatic registration. This is where you go and normally you interact with the DMV and then they automatically register you to vote. Not everyone is a voter, but in states that run that, they are now added to the list, and that is an extra name to which you can attach a mail in ballot. The Biden FBI, of all people, discovered this scam in New Jersey with Democrat primaries. But in 2020, Biden won 18 out of 20 states that had automatic voter registration, and the electoral count was 243 to 9.
Hmm.
In other words, Biden had 90% of the electoral votes he needed to win the presidency just in automatic voter registration states. Then in 2024, Trump did marginally better because he flipped a few states. He flipped Georgia and Nevada and Michigan, and then he won Pennsylvania. But he still lost automatic registration states 18 to 6, 224 electoral votes to 61. So Trump carried 248 out of 253 electoral votes not under automatic registration. So when the Democrats get into a state and they're able to take control of and corrupt the voter rolls and expand mail in voting, they cement themselves into power. This is why I found it interesting when Newt Gingrich, who wrote the foreword once again, said that he doesn't believe elections are stolen. He thinks they're rigged, because this alludes to a greater infrastructure to making sure election results tip in a certain direction.
What is the difference between rigged and stolen? I mean, if you rig them, aren't you going to steal them?
That sounds a little bit similar, but it's not so much as like a flip of a switch in 2020, which everybody thinks that bam, they pause the count and then they flip the switch. There had been a structure that had been built for 4 years in 2016 to allow what needed to occur to happen, primarily the expansion of automatic registration to gin up more registrations, or in the case of Pennsylvania, in 2019, a Republican run legislature green lighted Act 77. Act 77 expanded the early voting window to 7 weeks, all the way into September, and allowed for no excuse mail in voting. So the result there was Donald Trump goes past Barack Obama's record vote total from 2008 when he won the biggest landslide in Pennsylvania in 44 years and gets passed in the same election he was setting a record in by Joe Biden. So the changing and loosening of laws is extensive planning and rigging rather than just a one-time steal.
So I just want to get this straight. You're saying that they were planning this back in 2016. They were putting everything into place for 2020?
Well, remember how confident everybody was in 2016 that Clinton would win the election.
Right.
I think that they thought Trump's best case was George Bush's electoral map of 285 votes. They underestimated him in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa, and probably Florida as well. But once that failed, almost nobody had automatic registration in 2016, and the ones that did had only had it in its infancy where it was only being installed. But by the time 2020 rolled around, 20 states were operating automatic voter registration. This is how you get the massive 81 million vote totals. So yes, once Trump got in there, and the introduction to my book is called "The Week the Laughter Stopped," because before 2020, when nobody knew who I was, I still kept up with all this stuff. And I remember all the memes and all the dunking on the left and all the laughing at Hillary losing the election. And they went straight to work and created a system in which they could produce ballots, not votes, and make sure that Trump was a one-term president. And the only reason he's president here in 2026 is because in 2024, he was actually too big to rig. Harris only outgained Biden in 6 states, and 4 of those 6 states were swing states. She almost matched him in Pennsylvania and Michigan, and I think that it was as simple as Trump pulling in voters that they thought they were going to have and winning by slim margins. Less than two in Pennsylvania, less than two in Michigan, less than one in Wisconsin, 2.2 in Georgia. You have to get out west before you see some decent margins on the battleground states.
So why do you think like in 2024, why didn't they just go all out and cheat? Why didn't they have the machines work overtime switching the votes? Why didn't they, use the dirty voter rolls? Why didn't they like push it to push her ahead? I mean, look what they did to
So I think
I mean, for example, look what they did to Biden. Biden, I mean, he got 81 million votes. I mean, I think at this point, nobody really believes that. But I mean, they pushed him up so high that it was kind of like unbelievable. But why didn't they just do that with Kamala?
part of this is a legitimacy problem. I tend to believe after evaluating the 2024 election that the plan for Harris to be president was to pull the first time in modern history a Democrat winning the Electoral College while losing the popular vote. So that required, so nobody wanted her to have 85 million votes that nobody would believe. So there's a problem of legitimacy. That means going all in on Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and probably Georgia based on what I saw in Metro Atlanta with the figures. But if Trump would have won the popular vote and Harris would have stolen the electoral vote, now you'd have conservatives calling for the end of the Electoral College. I think it's simple. I think that in 2024, they lack the narrative, number one, to be able to pull off a trick like that. In 2020, it was the polls, it was the negative numbers, it was the economic numbers, it was the pandemic. And even so, the margin between Trump and Biden in 3 states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, or I'm sorry, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona, 42,918 votes in 3 states. So despite a 7 million gap in the popular vote, despite a 4.5 point gap in the same, 42,918. Well, they didn't have the same benefits of narrative in 2024. This is why Trump went all in on early voting, why he went all in on get your mail-in ballots in, even though the election integrity gurus think that early voting and mail-in ballots are a reason that the elections are corrupt in the first place. But the result was Republicans let early vote all over the country. She didn't have her firewall for mail-in votes in Pennsylvania, and the election day vote fizzled, and Trump pulled in a lot of voters that the Democrats would have needed for their fragile coalition to win. And once the Electoral College out east was decided, and it was no guarantee, Harris actually outperformed Biden for votes in Georgia, which no one really believes. But once the Electoral College states were decided out east, there is no incentive to steal any of the other presidential battlegrounds. So the shift went to the down ballot races. I can look at Eric Hovde for Senate in Wisconsin, Mike Rogers in Michigan, and Sam Brown in Nevada, and probably Kerry Lake in Arizona for examples of the down ballot steal, which is now impacting what we have with the SAVE Act because there's 53 Republican senators instead of 62 if you would have fixed the 2022 and 24 elections.
So, with all your research and everything that you look into with the election rigging, why is it so hard to prove? If it's running rampant and people, it's the ballots, it's the dirty voter rolls, it's the machines. Why can't we prove it? Do they hide it? Do they make it so it's impossible? Are judges on the take? What is the problem here?
In some states, the cheating is legal now. This is the danger of allowing this to persist. Nevada has fully legalized automatic registration, universal vote by mail, and ballot harvesting. You can look over in California, same, Washington, Oregon, everything in the West almost is the same. Then you have the issues of thresholds and legal precedent. The people who devised early election laws never imagined that data and sophisticated technology could be put to work in the way it is today. In the Kerry Lake case in 2022, which thank God her team actually got this in court. This has helped substantially. But the judge there, Peter Thompson, said that the threshold, of course, by the law, is to identify vote by vote the difference between the two candidates. So if you can't come up with 17,117 ballots, then you really can't be here anyway. And then he set the bar so high for prove that there is no signature verification, even though Kurt Olson and his team proved that they were validating hundreds of signatures per minute without even looking at them. So the courts, number one, don't want to hear these major election challenges. The ones that have been heard have been very small for local races for dozens of votes that were fraudulently cast. But if you can get it done and you can get them in the boxes, because of the secret ballot, the fake votes count. So the ballot harvesting, of course, the Democrats will fight to the death. Look at Mark Elias to sue people for thinking about monitoring drop boxes, even though I can go to the ATM and be right underneath the camera the entire time. So part of this is lawfare, part of it is the corruption of courts, and part of it is because it's very difficult to catch.
So do you think the investigation in Fulton County, the investigation in Arizona, do you think these investigations with the FBI, DOJ, central banks cause inflation, and that is a threat to you, your savings account, your retirement? Ask yourself an honest question. Does your dollar go as far as it did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or even last year? So what does the next decade look like for you and your savings? If your portfolio lacks exposure to gold, one of history's most reliable economic hedges, it's time to rethink your strategy. Gold has kept up with inflation and in many periods outpaced it. My friends at Noble Gold Investment specialize in helping people protect their wealth with physical gold and silver. Whether you're rolling over an IRA or making a direct purchase, their team walks you through the entire process and makes it very simple. No pressure, just education and experience. Right now, all new qualified accounts will receive a free 1/10 of an ounce American Gold Eagle as a thank you. Visit X22Gold.com. That is X22Gold.com and discover how easy it is to protect your financial future. Or just click the link in the description. And remember, past performance may not be indicative of future results. Investing in precious metals involves risk. Consult your financial advisor before making investment decisions. Even Tulsi Gabbard, who's involved, do you think now we're going to find out that, yes, the elections are rigged, let's say in Fulton County, Georgia?
It's a really good thing that I don't know a lot about your question because that means that people are keeping their mouths shut. If we had loose lips sink ships, I think we all know that. Now, if everybody knew everything, that would be a bad sign. Georgia was a physical raid. They went in there and seized balloting materials. There's been data online, even on X a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, where people are going over ballot scans and ballot images and finding exact ballots that have been duplicated, triplicated, suggesting that maybe there is a lot of truth to the repeat scanning of the same ballot. The problem with mail in voting is a ballot that is dropped in the mail is a valid vote, and once it goes on the board, it's not coming off. In Arizona, that is not a physical seizure of anything; it is a grand jury authorizing the taking of electronic voting records, which could be valuable. Cast vote records, voter registration, and check-in information is important. Ballot images. So I'm not sure what they're going to find, but the fact is that they have these warrants approved is a pretty good sign that they think they've got something.
So let me just ask you this. What happens if they find out that the elections were rigged and let's say Trump really won in Georgia back in 2020? And maybe even Arizona, maybe, Kerry, Abe Hamadeh. I mean, all these people, what happens if they find out that these people actually won the elections? Where are we then?
It depends on how far you want to dig, because chapter 4 of my book, The History of Election Fraud, and we could go all
Mm.
the way back we could go back damn near to the founding of the republic and take everything back down to the ground. Which judicial appointments do you undo? which bills are no longer valid, which executive orders are gone. I'm not sure where that goes. The most important thing going forward is the wholesale reform of election laws and what I consider the 10 points to true election integrity. The Save America Act is a really good start, and it's going to make online registration and automatic registration scams difficult. But I also believe, like everyone else who are growing impatient with lack of justice and lack of arrests, that would have to result in some sort of consequences. The good news about the elections is Trump himself has a particular axe to grind over stolen elections, since it was he who was tossed out of office in 2020, 2021.
So I mean, you have in your book the 10 points for, I guess, election integrity. I mean, the Save America Act, has no mail-in ballots, paper ballots, no machines, one-day voting, voter ID, voter registration with ID. What other things do you think we need?
The most important thing is to get away from corrupted voter registration or voter registration at all. We have one example in this country that I'd really like to see replicated, and that's in North Dakota. Now, not everyone, including people I like and respect, not everyone agrees with me because North Dakota is so small. But North Dakota has no voter registration. The method of voting is you show up with an ID and you get a ballot, and someone writes your name, puts your name in a system where obviously you can't come vote twice. They do have a system for legitimate absentee ballots that require identification. But the key to this is precinct sizes of a small number of registered voters in which you can come get a ballot, vote in person, and then leave. But now some of these precincts are so big. In Arizona, Maricopa County has at least 17 precincts with more than 5,000 registered voters each. Pima County has a bunch, Navajo and Mojave counties. So there's a disease, and the cure that comes out is mail in voting and a weeks long early voting period. And during that early voting period is when the other side front loads their votes. And that was very clear to me in the 2025 elections in Virginia, when you have a fairly competitive race for attorney general between Jay Jones and Jason Miyares, where you have Jones narrowly winning the early vote, Miyares, the Republican, winning the election day vote, but Jones winning the mail in ballot vote by more than 47 points. I think now, instead of backloading ballots on election night and counting for days, the method of rigging elections is to dump as many mail in ballots up front as possible. The issue with that is sometimes you get really large margins like Spanberger plus 15 points that people struggle to believe.
So, what do you think is going to happen with the midterms that are coming up? Because I think this is a huge battle right now. Because again, if the Democrats win the House and the Senate, you know what they're going to do. They're going to impeach Trump. They're going to try to get rid of him. Um, so if, let's say, the Save America Act does pass, I think this will make it very, very difficult for them. But what do you think is going to happen during the midterms? Because I think throughout this period of time since Trump came into office, I think Harmeet Dillon and many others have been cleaning up the dirty voter rolls, trying to get rid of the mail-ins. I mean, even if let's say the Save America Act doesn't pass, what do you think the Democrats are going to do to try to win?
Well, the Democrats have a historical tailwind right now that helps them, and that is the fact that midterm elections are very tough for the president's party. In 20 out of 23 midterms since 1934, the president's party has lost seats in the House. The average loss of seats is 27 seats. And the only three exceptions for the president losing seats are 1934, 1998, and 2002. The other reality we have is neither party has a high ceiling or a low floor because the gerrymandering in red and blue states has secured so many seats. I only count 39 House seats playable by either side this year. I think that the Democrats have the edge based on midterm dynamics. I don't think that it's a sure thing, but if they succeed in gerrymandering Virginia to 10 to 1 and Colorado to 7 to 1, I don't see how the Democrats wouldn't take the House in that scenario. However, the Senate is going to favor the Republicans. I see really no path today for Democrats to win the Senate. I see at least 51 Republican Senate seats and as many as 55. So the good news is the Republicans should hold the Senate. And the Democrats, of course, if you play the long game and if they win the House, you're going to have 2 years of them trying to impeach Trump. The strong likelihood of the economy booming based on his economic approach and people in the long run looking at the Democrats as a party that they do have a dwindling bench. Their voter registration is terrible. In presidential elections, they're probably going to be wiped out for the next couple of decades. But they've got a little bit of staying power for now. But I think that a Democrat House will probably do them more favors or do them more harm than it will favors.
So, what do you think will happen if the Save America Act passes? Do you think the Democrats will be able to win the House or the Senate?
The Save America Act strongest points, given that it requires citizenship verification to register to vote. It will because of that it will gut automatic registration going forward, online registration going forward, and also it will make cheating harder because of voter ID, especially with regard to mail-in voting. But there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done once that is complete because the existing voter registrations, if they're still in the system, will be useful. I don't understand why we can be expected to file a tax return every year or register a vehicle every year, but once in a lifetime, because of extraordinary circumstances, we can't dump voter rolls and have everyone come in with an ID and re-register to vote. So there will still be the risk of substantial cheating when the SAVE Act passes, but it's an essential passage to make sure that we get that first bite to real reforms with a lot of teeth.
Do you think if that passes, do you think we would be able to gain the House?
I don't think it's going to have a fast enough impact to change all the election results this year, but it will tamp back on some cheating related to mail-in voting with where there's ID requirements. That is definitely true.
Even with let's just use this as an example because Trump says he might even use an executive order to force everyone to use a voter ID. Now, when he says that, yeah, an executive order, but it has to carry weight, I guess, with maybe a national security threat. So let's say, for example, that they show there was rigging and foreign influence in Georgia and maybe in Arizona. And he says, okay, this is a national security threat, and I'm going to write an executive order because now we can see that China was involved or Iran was involved, and they were coordinating with maybe people on the ground in this country to manipulate the elections. Now I'm writing an executive order because this is a national security threat, and now everyone has to use a voter ID. What do you think of that scenario?
Well, I think that it's a good scenario. I think that they've been laying the groundwork for a national security threat based on Trump's executive order from spring of 2025. This doesn't mean that the left isn't going to court shop and make sure they can get this thing frozen for the time being. So it's something that they need to happen. What's more important is that the Congress would seek to codify any of the executive orders that have been put in. The thing that people need to understand is the Save America Act has 85 to 15 public support. That's what makes it a really good bill is because it should not be a polarizing bill. Yet even the so-called sensible Democrat senators all oppose it, which there's a major disconnect. It makes you wonder exactly why they're so worried about it passing when they could really just get this off of their plates and probably come across with some good moderate credentials for the midterms if they wanted to.
I mean, to me, when you hear the Democrats saying, well, Chuck Schumer saying not one Democrat's going to vote for it, and the Democrat, their constituents actually want it. I mean, I think that tells everyone everything you need to know about these people. They really don't care what the American people actually want. Even their own party, what they want, they don't care.
No, they don't. As long as it's about preserving the existing system and staying in power, then that's what they're going to care about the most. They all mimic one another. I would be surprised if Virginia's new administration didn't do as much as they could to bolster down elections while Spanberger is in office right now. So they sort of betray the truth about elections with the way they behave. And that's one of my points about the 2020 election. The only non statistical point about 10 irrefutable points of that election was the fact that the media and President Biden did all the covering up they could. When we were looking for audits, Biden was in Pennsylvania trying to encourage the legislature not to authorize any audits anywhere in the state. Really, the best way to vanquish your enemy is to prove hands down that you won. But they would never do that, and they still won't do anything to prove that their elections are clean.
Hmm. So moving forward, I mean, what do you see as like the best scenario to have secure elections, fair elections, without the ability for lawfare and the D's and others to manipulate the elections? I mean, Is the Save America Act enough? I think you already said no, it isn't. But what do we need to make it really, really secure that they can't weasel their way back in and try to manipulate the elections?
It is all about transparency to make sure that the people trust election results and that there's not much of a window to cheat. I think that we ignore a lot of really useful data that is more anecdotal. But you have Arizona, which is a third the size of Florida. Florida counts almost all of its votes by bedtime on election night. Arizona takes almost 2 weeks to count its votes. That's a major disconnect. Or we can look at the international environment. 34 out of 47 European countries ban mail-in voting. And a lot of those have really good reasons for having done so, like France. Then you have countries like Mexico, Japan, Russia, Israel that ban mail-in voting. So I'm not sure why this isn't more a part of our conversation. Florida turning ballot harvesting into a felony. Nevada, ballot harvesting fully legal. Washington, Oregon, California, the same. So what we have developed here is a country in which states have used the elections clause of the Constitution to make laws that essentially rig the elections for the party in power. And it disenfranchises other states. And that was the basis of Ken Paxton's Texas versus Pennsylvania case in 2020, that Texas was disenfranchised by the miscarriage of election laws in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So getting people back to an even playing field, voting in person, voting on one day with very limited exceptions for people who legitimately can't vote. All right, controlling mail-in ballots to deployed military members and legitimately disabled, and having some sort of reporting requirements. I would even suggest that the 10% of largest counties in a state report their votes first. I think that it would be a meltdown if in Pennsylvania 66 counties held their votes back until Philadelphia County put theirs in, and every time a Republican won the state. So offering better transparency to voters will help voter trust in elections, but it will also make it difficult for hidden techniques of rigging out elections to be able to stand. But elections are currently ripped off on election season, which lasts, I mean, it starts in September. This is why in October, after the first debate, you see so many searches about how do I change my vote? There's no reason that a civilized country, world power, superpower, should be running 2 month long elections that take a month to count after the election.
I agree with that. I don't even understand. I remember when I was growing up, we really didn't have anything, vote early. You would just go on that day and you would go to the machines, the curtain would close and you punch the thing in there. And, I watched my parents do it and that was it. We didn't have all this, hey, 2 months in advance, a month in advance, start vote, get your little sticker, vote early. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, unless you want to cheat. That's the only thing that makes sense.
That's the design. That is
Yeah.
the design.
Yeah, that's it. But let me ask you this. I mean, you mentioned other countries like France and UK and other countries. Even though they don't have the mail-ins and they do have voter ID, do they still have cheating in their elections in those countries? You know?
It's very hard to cheat. Now, the difference we have here in our country is there's voter fraud everywhere. Voter fraud is when I try to vote twice, or when somebody, deliberately lies to make sure they can cast a vote somewhere else, or same day registration if you're living in Massachusetts and try to get over in New Hampshire. That's voter fraud. Election fraud is a an organized approach, usually by government, to throw hundreds of thousands of votes. My numbers in Pennsylvania look to me like Democrats can produce 600,000 more votes than they would otherwise be able to get in a genuine election. So there's always going to be voter fraud anywhere you go. It depends on whether it can be caught. But the tighter the election laws are, the more difficult it is to commit widespread election fraud, especially when the ballots are counted at the precinct by multiple observers and reported in one day.
Yeah, I guess boarding up the windows like they did in Detroit during the 2020 election. I can't even believe that no one even said like, okay, look, this is ridiculous. This is an election of the president of the United States, and we're boarding up the windows so nobody can see what's going on. I mean, this should be a red flag right there.
Look, I referenced this. I referenced this in the book.
Yeah.
That one of the big tells about stolen elections. So the British Broadcasting Corporation in 2016, before the Trump Clinton election, they were covering foreign elections and they were focusing on sub-Saharan Africa. And they wrote an article about how worldwide observers or concerned citizens could spot vote manipulation or election fraud in developing countries. And there were a number of things like mismatch reporting between the ultimate headquarters and the precinct. Um, And then you have another one, prolonged count. So taking a long time to count the votes is a telltale sign that elections are being robbed. So why do we tolerate that in the United States? There were two
Right.
Republican House seats in California, U.S. House seats in California, that the Democrats took down ballot after Trump had won the election um, in December. And of course, these Republicans crawled off and conceded the election. But Harris trailed Joe Biden in California by 1.8 million votes in her own home state, when everyone knows that you perform better in your home state in a presidential race, which really proves how corrupt the 2020 election was. But you can't have elections where people are going to trust them if it takes more than one evening to count votes.
I agree with that 100%. I think isn't there a case in the Supreme Court right now where the Supreme Court's looking at what election day means?
I think so, but election day to me is pretty literal. I would afford small windows for people to vote early if they have a legitimate excuse to not be
Right.
there. Doctors, nurses, pilots, truckers, election workers, those types. And for mail-in ballots or absentee ballots, as they used to be called, deployed military members and the legitimately disabled. That's about it. We go shoot guns in person, we go to the golf range in person, we go grocery shopping in person, we take the kids to the movies or the games in person. So why is it so difficult to expect people once every 2 years to go out and vote in person?
I agree. I don't think it's that difficult at all. Seth, I want to thank you very much for coming on the X22 Report Spotlight. If people wanted to get your book, where should they go to get it?
The best place to order it is on Amazon. I realize some people are not big Amazon fans, but that's the best bang for the buck for everybody involved and the quickest way to get it to you. It's available in paperback, hardcover, ebook, Kindle, and Audible, which is recorded by yours truly.
Oh, wow. That's really good. I'll put all the links at the bottom of the video. Once again, Seth, thank you very much for coming on the X22 Report Spotlight. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me and keep up the great work.
You too. Thank you.